Hi, Scott Conley, and I'm going to do chapter two, part three of chapter five, the U.S. Constitution. Now, the Constitution is not really that long. And it's much drier than you might think. You haven't read it through. It's really about how to set up the government and what the government can do, with the federal government can do. It's very important to keep in mind that these were 13 states, and they 13 free, and they didn't have a full lot of economy. Different groups have settled different colonies. And so they're just like today, you feel like the division between red states and blue states, or river states and southern states. There was much more disagreement between states back then. Religious differences between Catholics and Protestants and different flavors of Protestantism were all very big, as well as industrialization, urbanization. Those are just really big things. So these were a group of people who didn't really trust each other. And they didn't really want to have a federal government telling them what to do. It was being run by states that they disagreed. Not much history. So one thing that they'd also had some bad experience with the previous voting that they had set up, because it was truly really effective. And all sorts of economic problems. So this was to fix things. So creates the branches of government: judicial, legislature, and the executive. It gives each of them certain powers. And then it divides the power between the federal and state governments. And this is the 10th Amendment. And it says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. What that means is if you can't find a basis for a law passed by the federal government in the Constitution as a power delegated to the federal government, then that power to that issue is reserved for the state. So, federal government is the supreme law of the land. There are a whole range of issues where it's silent. And if it's silent, the 10th Amendment says it belongs to the states, to the people, to the Senate. And the amendments also protect individual rights. Free speech, freedom of religion. So the federal government, one DC. It's called the federal system, meaning some powers belong to the federal government, some powers belong to the state governments. That's what federalism means. Specifically delegated powers, also those enumerated powers, authorize the federal government to deal with certain national and international affairs. So the whole doctrine of separation of powers. We didn't want one branch to become too powerful that it could override the others, because by separating powers, we put in some safeguards. It wouldn't be a dictator. And the first three articles of the Constitution set out the responsibilities of the three branches of government. The executive does this, Congress does this, the judicial does this. And there are checks and balances that prevent a single branch of government from becoming too powerful. So, well, President can nominate people to the Supreme Court. It has to be approved by the Senate of the legislature. And then once they're over and have been approved, the president can't just remove them. Basically, that they've lifetime. Supremacy clause. That establishes the federal level, within the Constitution, within the statutes and regulations, and it's the supreme law of land. So if the state law conflicts with federal law, the federal law. This provided that the law falls under those enumerated powers in the first place. Okay, was the preemption doctrine allows Congress to expressly provide for exclusive legislative activity on a specific area of the law. But the Commerce Clause. This gives the Congress a lot more power than many people realize. The one, it grants Congress the authority to regulate commerce among the states and volumes. Doesn't, that's like it's criminal laws. The other society about that. One thing is that the delegates to the federal government the authority to regulate commerce with the legal trials. Much more efficient than he sits in this today. It's rather much smaller, but it just gives them the power to federal government in order to regulate. So only the federal government can regulate foreign commerce. Interstate commerce. And this is where it's really good. Because it allows the federal government to regulate activity that affect interstate commerce. So that can bring in a whole lot of issues, and a whole lot of business regulation, and a whole lot of other regulation, because now interstate commerce is much bigger than it was before. So most businesses have some interstate commerce. So Congress says that it can regulate all sorts of business activities. Even like the drug laws, those were validated because they said they have interstate commerce, so the federal government can regulate. So now we have the federal drug laws. The state police power means that states have an ability to regulate interstate commerce transactions that happen within the borders of the state. So, that means that Louisiana, if the transaction is only in Louisiana, then Louisiana could regulate it, but if it's interstate, federal government. And they took that very broad. What is interstate commerce? And they pretty much regulate it to say they can regulate on all sorts of issues in business work. Dormant commerce clause. That just means that there's an area of the use of commerce that's not currently regulated by Congress, but where state regulations cannot be given for. Bill of Rights and other amendments. Okay, the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They weren't originally part of the Constitution, but the authors realized pretty quickly on in the debates going on that they needed to put this in written plans. So the first amendment, and one thing to remember and keep in mind is originally the first 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights like into the federal government. So it did. So these were areas that the federal government could not do, and state governments still could. So, First Amendment guarantees the rights of free speech, assembly, and religion. Meaning the federal government can't regulate interstate like the state governments often do. In some states had an official religion. Two other amendments that are frequently litigated are the due process clause and the equal protection clause. So let's go over them. First, freedom of speech. Fully protected speech means that there's no provision or regulations can be created. Limited protected speech means that it can be restricted to the time, person, manner, but not the punishment. Unprotected speech. Regulation restrictions are appropriate in certain kinds of speech can be truly forbidden. So, usually if it's about politics or religion, that's considered fully protected speech. there can be limited protected speech, meaning, you can't protest here. But we could protest every day. So it's limited protected. Unprotected speech, it has to do with stuff that just, you can't lie, you can't scream fire in a movie theater and claim that it's freedom of speech. You can't dish other people and tell lies about them and say that it's protected speech. So not everything you say is protected. And this is freedom. When you're sometimes people say, oh, my freedom of speech has been interfered with. This is only means that the government can't pass laws to do things to affect the freedom of speech. So you express your opinion, political opinions at work, you get fired. That's not state action. That's not the government action. It's your boss. And your boss can't do that. Government could not. Say what you're doing with so you go and put you in jail because you were using things. But people can ban, boycott you, employers can fire you, the things are obscene speech not protected. And this is sort of a moving target. The work as a whole appeals to the purity of interest in a contemporary communities standard. So it's kind of like the standards of society at that time will decide whether something's obscene or not. Or works that depicts or describes sexual contact in a patently offensive way, and sometimes be obscene speech, which means it can be ugly. And works that also like serious artistic, political, or scientific value in the world. Since these are sort of vague and moving terms, these things often have to be litigated in the courts over and as times change. What becomes prurient, with society brings us obscene, sometimes changes. Speech in cyberspace. The Communication Decency Act allows for regulation of speech on the internet. It's designed to protect those under the age of 18 from exposure to sexual content on the internet. Case law provides further definition in the statute and guarantees the highest level of protection on the internet. Louisiana recently passed a law that if you try to view porn over the internet, and that internet provider is something in a different state, you have to somehow verify your age that you are 18. So that's where that's kind of a speech that's being regulated. Freedom of religion. You see what's called the Establishment Clause. In the First Amendment, prohibits the government from establishing state religion or promoting one religion over another. Another way that it's sometimes interpreted now is promoting religion over non-religion. State can do that. Because the federal state because it's up in some constitution. And the free exercise clause prohibits immigrants with the ability to practice a chosen religion. It's not 100%. The sort of test that the courts will use to decide whether this aspect of practicing religion is protected from non-immigrants. Due process clause prohibits the government from taking life, liberty, or property. Means the scope of statutes, ordinances, and regulations. Means that there's a process that it has to go through. It's going to take the life for the real body. Procedural due process requires proper notice of hearing before deprivation of life or the real body. So there are all sorts of steps that have to go into place. And there has to be a statute. If someone who violated its constitution and all sorts of rights of the defendant have been protected. Protection Now, this one, it's a lot of fluff. It says the state, local, and federal government connected with United for protection. Basically, and that's in the US Constitution Amendment 14. It was passed after the Civil War. And one thing it did was say, hey, these things, they're protecting the Bill of Rights. Protecting the Bill of Rights, prohibit the federal government from doing this thing. We're going to say that now applies to the states and the rights and the Bill of Rights. So we were 100 years old. And so if we have two citizens, we're similar in many ways. It treats one good one way, no good another. That would be protection. And in those cases, the different tests that the courts will use. Now, the first group is strict scrutiny. Any law that treats these two groups differently really will have to prove why we're just going to be considered unconstitutional and indefinite. And for his activities of relationship based on a suspected clause involves a usually this means race or national origin, because those are specifically mentioned. So there's a law that treats people differently based on national origin or their race. That's going to get the strictest scrutiny in most likely to be done. Intermediate scrutiny. Now, there are a lot of groups involved in these two. If it's viewed as an intermediate scrutiny, it makes it harder for the government to make the law pass constitutional text. It's a rational, it can be a little bit easier. So intermediate scrutiny. Classification based on protected classes that are reasonably related to legitimate government purpose. So in this case, it's like, yes, we're creating this group differently from that group. It's not based on race. The groups are not defined by race or national origin. But there has to be a legitimate government purpose for this. And what we say a legitimate government purpose usually has to do with health and well-being. Rational basis very easy. If there's just some sort of justifiable reason, then it's okay. So to put this in context, when marriage equality went to the Supreme Court, one group just said that there only had to be a rational basis. There has to be a justifiable reason why we don't want people of the same sex. The other group said that you intermediate scrutiny, and there really has to be a legitimate government purpose. And in doing it. Now, it did not pass the scrutiny of the judges on the Supreme Court. They agreed that they should get intermediate scrutiny, in which case there was not really a legitimate government purpose. If there had been rational basis, if someone legislated, well, there was a, they said there was a justifiable reason for these laws that prohibited before this one. Okay, so that wraps up part 2 of this chapter. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions. We are just skimming the very top of the stages with this chapter of the Constitution. I could have two courses in constitutional law, and have plenty of material for both. But for now, this is what we have. There are other courses that you can take as an elective in the program that go more into depth. Okay, good luck.